Okay, quick audio test for the live stream. ABC, 1, 2, 3. Do, re, mi. Check, check, check.
Everybody, come on in this house. Everybody, come on in this house. Everybody, come on in this house. Come on in this house, you're welcome here. If you want a living wage, come on in this house. If you want a living wage, come on in this house. If you want a living wage, come on in this house. Come on in this house, you're welcome here. Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Come on in this house. Black Lives Matter. Come on in this house. Black Lives Matter. Come on in this house. Come on in this house, you're welcome here. Seeking sanctuary. If you're seeking sanctuary, come on in this house. If you're seeking sanctuary, come on in this house. If you're seeking sanctuary, come on in this house. Come on in this house, you're welcome here. LGBTQ. LGBTQ. Come on in this house. LGBTQ. Come on in this house. LGBTQ. Come on in this house. If you're queer, you're welcome here. Everybody. Everybody. Come on in this house. Everybody, come on in this house. Everybody, come on in this house. Come on in this house. You're welcome here.
Hello. Thanks for joining us for the 41st Annual Parker Lecture and Awards Breakfast. My name is Brian Lapis. I am Secretary of the Board of the United Church of Christ Media Justice Ministry and a professional broadcaster with WWLP-TV in Springfield, Massachusetts, and a member of the First Congregational Church of South Hadley, Massachusetts, United Church of Christ. Welcome to everyone who is here with us in person and everyone who has joined us online. This event is a tribute to our ministry's founder, the Reverend Dr. Everett Parker. Dr. Parker began this work in the 1960s to ensure that the communications technologies of that time served all the people. This morning, we are going to hear from some of the most senior leaders in communication policy today and celebrate their efforts to carry forward Dr. Parker's work into our present day. If you are joining us online, please introduce yourselves in the comments. We also invite you to use the hashtag ParkerLecture2023 as we create a shared community and celebrate our honorees online and in person. To begin our event today, we acknowledge our presence on the land historically occupied by the native Piscataway peoples and express our gratitude to our hosts, the First Congregational Church, United Church of Christ of Washington, D.C. I now want to call on the Reverend Amanda Hendler-Voss, senior pastor of this church, to offer our invocation.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Amanda Hendler-Voss, and I am delighted to welcome you to First Congregational United Church of Christ, a joyful and justice-seeking community in the heart of our nation's capital. As we say every Sunday, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Yesterday, I received a phone call from my friend and pen pal of 17 years who lives on death row in North Carolina. Robbie said that he was in his cell when Tropical Storm Ophelia began to flood the floor. He was moved out of his cell block that day, but his friend was not. The whole block smells of mold and mildew, which is coming in through the vents, creating hazardous conditions for this friend who is immune compromised and has survived multiple strokes. After his phone call, I was able to contact the Secretary of Prisons to advocate for the inmates stuck in moldy cells. For incarcerated people to be able to communicate with the outside world. The work of our keynote speaker and awardees to improve access and affordability of communications in prisons is absolutely vital. And when I shared news of today's event with Robbie, he wanted me to extend his thanks to you, Dr. Valentin, Senator Duckworth, and Chairman Rosenworcel. So it is my distinct joy to welcome our keynote speaker, our honorees, and all of you to First Church for this important event. I'd like to close with the words of a prayer that was spoken last night at a prayer vigil that brought together Jews, Muslims, and Christians to pray for peace in Israel and Palestine. This prayer was written by a Palestinian mother and an Israeli rabbi who is also a mother. It felt appropriate for today. Will you pray with me? God of life, who heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds, may it be your will to hear the prayer of mothers. For you did not create us to kill each other, nor to live in fear, anger, or hatred in your world. But rather, you have created us so we can grant permission to one another to sanctify your name of life, your name of peace in this world. With the tears of all women who feel deeply the pain of these difficult days, we raise our hands to you, O God. Have mercy on us. Hear our voice, that we shall not despair, but see life in each other and have hope for each other. Let us choose life. For you are peace. Your world is peace, and all that is yours is peace. Amen.
Good morning. Okay, I think we can do a little better than that. I said good morning. All right, thank you, Reverend Amanda. We very much appreciate it. I am delighted to be here this morning, and I hope you are too. Attending my first Parker lecture in person. My name is Charles Jefferson Jr. I am a member of the UCC Media Justice Board, and I am the Director of Marketing and Communications for the National Setting of the United Church of Christ in Cleveland, Ohio. I couldn't be more pleased to be representing the National Church here today, and I'm also humbled to be filling the same position that Everett Parker held way back when our denomination was created back in 1957. We would like to acknowledge the presence of important policymakers from the world of media and tech policy here today. We are incredibly proud to have with us staff from Capitol Hill, from the Federal Communications Commission, from Capitol Hill, from the Federal Communications Commission. And then on the UCC side, we also have Mike Neurath, who heads up our DC office. Mike, please stand so the people can recognize you. And if you have ever been honored here at the Parker Lecture, please give us a wave so we can acknowledge you. We are delighted in particular to see Maya Wiley, last year's lecturer, here with us today. She is not with us, but nonetheless, in addition to honoring Reverend Parker's legacy and our distinguished policymakers, we are also here today to ensure we have the resources we need to do our work. I want to extend our sincerest appreciation to our sponsors for their financial support. These companies and organizations and their staff members engage in serious discourse with us. Sometimes we work side by side, other times we may disagree. Nevertheless, by remaining in dialogue, we hope that we can work together to create a more equitable, more digitally connected world for everyone. I would ask that you hold your applause until the end as I read their names. So thank you to our lead sponsors, Google, Meta, our patrons, Comcast, and the United Church of Christ. We would also like to thank our nonprofit and corporate special friends, the Benton Institute for Broadcasting Society, Best in Krieger LLP, Charter Communications, Nelson Mullins, Verizon, and please thank you to our wonderful supporters circle. Now please join me in recognizing them. I would also like to thank everyone who has brought a ticket or made a donation. And please know that it's not too late to join them. If you are here online, you will see the link in the chat. And if you are here in person, simply follow the QR code. Every contribution makes a difference. At this time, we'd also like to thank Byron Adams and the staff here at First Congregational for all of their help with this year's event, and our meeting planner, Courtney Weber. Courtney, where are you? She's somewhere planning. She's done a magnificent job. Please give them a hand. The Parker Lecture always gives us an opportunity to reflect on our work in the past year. The whole UCC denomination came together at its biennial General Synod in Indianapolis, the first in-person national meeting since the COVID pandemic. We were delighted to pass a resolution of witness that reasserted our historic commitment to digital justice. UCC Media Justice worked with our wider church ministries and Global Hope teams as experts on the resolution. In addition, our denomination took several new historic steps. We elected our new general minister and president, the Reverend Dr. Karen Georgia Thompson, who was just installed this last Friday evening. Reverend Thompson is the first woman of color to lead our denomination. May we say amen to that? And so you can share a few minutes of the energy and beauty of this event. We would like to present to you a short video. That was truly an inspiring week. In addition to our achievements and progress, the UCC commits to holding itself accountable. At our Synod, the UCC also recognized that it must acknowledge an important part of our founding narrative that has sometimes been overlooked or ignored. The UCC committed to fully recognizing the Afro-Christian tradition as an important part of the denomination's creation. And the UCC is also in the midst of its own racial justice audit. As we pursue racial justice work, it is important that we walk the path we ask others to follow, and that we seek out and acknowledge our own errors and make amends. I think that deserves an amen and a round of applause. In addition to the work of the whole denomination, during and after General Synod, the United Church of Christ Media Justice Ministry that we gather here today to celebrate today was hard at work helping our UCC congregations turn this summer's digital resolution into action. We also celebrate this year the year since we last convened for a Parker lecture, because in the last days of 2022, the United States Congress passed unanimously the Martha Wright Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act. And we are delighted to recognize Mrs. Wright Reed's grandson, Eulandis, and his wife, who are here with us today. Please wave. Good to see you. Cheryl Leanza worked closely with our honoree, Senator Tammy Duckworth, her amazing staff, and other congressional leaders to get the bill passed. And Senator Rosenworcel and the Federal Communications Commission immediately picked up the baton and began writing the rules that will lower communication costs charged to incarcerated persons and their loved ones. And in the last year, we've been active, as always, at the FCC. We've been working with our civil rights partners on a new civil rights law. The bipartisan infrastructure law included groundbreaking digital non-discrimination protections, and the FCC will soon be adopting rules to implement them. We are working closely with all of our partners in industry and in public interest civil rights organizations to get Congress to fully fund the program that helps low-income households afford broadband internet services, the Affordable Connectivity Program. The UCC was proud to provide some of the foundational work to establish the program, but we need more money to keep that going. Now that 20 million people are enrolled and counting on it. That's 20 million people. And finally, FCC Chair Rosenworcel has a full slate of commissioners to help her get her agency's work done. So in the coming year, we will be continuing our work to make media ownership more diverse, to reestablish network neutrality, to require the collection of equal employment data, and to finalize new rules for prison communications services. We will work with all of our civil rights colleagues in Congress to press for privacy protections and civil rights safeguards over artificial intelligence. Now, I am delighted to hand over the microphone to our board chair, Earl Williams Jr., to introduce our first honoree, Elisa Valentin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Earl Williams, Jr. I'm the chair of the UCC Media Justice Board of Directors and also a sitting council member in the city of Shaker Heights, Ohio. The Donald McGannon Award is given each year to someone who works to increase diversity in communications in the industry or in the policymaking sector. Dr. Elisa Valentin has made it her mission to light a path forward so that the people in the rooms making technology and communication policies reflect the people who will be impacted by them. Many people took note of Dr. Valentin's early blog entitled, "Tech Policy So White." Not long after that, Dr. Valentin collaborated on a Seat at the Table, a guide to building inclusive tech policy organizations. And later, as an advisor to FCC Commissioner Geoffrey Starks, she helped him launch the FCC's Early Career Staff Diversity Initiative. It provided paid internships to students from underrepresented minorities and increased recruitment efforts at historically black colleges. and universities and other minority-serving institutions. And all this time, Dr. Valentin has found some time for teaching, including at Norfolk State University, where she currently teaches. Dr. Valentin's work is notable for its focus on clear, concrete, and specific actions to bring more people into the discussions and leadership regarding communications and technology policy. As someone who has had a lifelong affiliation with the National Urban League, that's me, in Cleveland, nearby to my hometown, I'm particularly delighted that Dr. Valentin has brought her expertise to the Washington Bureau of the League. In this position, Dr. Valentin has continued her work to ensure that persons of color can fully participate in the economic success of our country. Further, we're delighted to recognize Dr. Valentin's hard work day in and day out. Not only is she busy bringing other people to the table, she is such a formidable expert that many organizations rely on her leadership and skill in developing filings, making policy recommendations, etc. Dr. Valentin works hard, but always does it with a smile, a gracious attitude, and a commitment to excellence. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Valentin and presenting to her the Donald H. McGannon Award.
Let me lower the mic. Thank you so much, Mr. Williams, for the kind introduction. Also, thank you to the UCC Media Justice Ministry for this honor. Thank you to Cheryl Lianza specifically for all of her advocacy over the years and for always being there for me when I needed to understand the history of a policy issue that isn't always obvious from reading the press or poring over the FCC docket, and for always making sure that people, no matter how new that they are to the space, always have an opportunity to contribute. I'm truly honored to be standing before you today, especially among fellow honorees, including Senator Duckworth and Chair Rosenworcel. Thank you both for your continued service. So let me begin by saying that I, like most people in this country, come from a family of unsung heroes who have not always had the privilege of hearing or feeling people honor them, because oftentimes we wait to honor people after they have left this earth, not always realizing or acknowledging in real time all the life lessons that they taught us or sacrifices they made for us to be in the positions that we are right now. So I want to take the time to thank my parents, Everett and Odessa Valentin, who are watching, streaming from Tifton, Georgia right now. And also my brother, Dr. Eddie Valentin Jr., who's here with us today, who have heard more about tech and telecom policy than they probably would have ever liked to hear. And at this time, they have a lot of thoughts and opinions about what a robust digital discrimination rule should look like and how best to protect the data of consumers on online platforms. But thank you to my mom for all of the times that she practiced spelling words with me and drove me to and from student council meetings and drama classes, and who also told me that she wasn't going to go get any new crayons at 8 o'clock at night just because I wanted to enter a coloring contest when we had crayons at the house. And to my brother, who taught me the love of creative writing when he would read me his short stories as a kid that were about 75 college-ruled pages long, front and back, and were not short at all. And finally, thank you to my dad, who told me to get back onto the field after I ran to the sidelines crying after a boy tackled me in a co-ed flag football game in second grade. But I'm sure that's one of the many reasons why I'm always willing to fight when I've been knocked down. I'm here today because of them, but also because of many of the people here in this room. And I'm forever grateful for the way that this community has poured into me over the years. You know, I was an intern in FCC Commissioner Clyburn's office about 7 years ago, which makes me sound young, but I was a third-year PhD student at that time, so there's that. But one of the first things that Commissioner Clyburn said to our intern class, and I'm paraphrasing here, people are always going to have something to say. And what you need to get comfortable with is knowing that when you lay your head down on your pillow at night, that you have done everything you can to move the ball forward in the best way that you can under those specific circumstances. Again, people are always going to have something to say. And as I've gone throughout my career, I have learned that that is oh so very true. And listen, you're not always going to make everyone happy, and you can't be everything to everyone all at the same time. But what you can do is to be true to yourself and to your values. And what you can also do is to not only bring yourself into the room, but look over to your neighbor and say, I'm going to bring them too. What we can't afford, however, is to be advocates or policymakers that are more concerned about what helps the few over the many. We can't be those who are hesitant to stand up to entities who seemingly have more power just because they have more money. We can't be unwilling to work with the other side because that could result in a fruitful relationship. See, to a lot of us in this room, policy isn't just a job. It's personal. At least I know it is for me. We're carrying every community that doesn't have the same access and the same privileges as us into that room. And it's a responsibility that we don't take lightly. But the more people that we have in the hallowed halls of Congress, the White House, the FCC, FTC, corporations, and civil society that look like me, that responsibility will then feel less like a boulder that we're trying to move uphill alone. And that's why I implore all of us to not only ask who is in the room, but also ask who is missing. Because those missing and strategically marginalized voices have value. The fact of the matter is, those that we count out from South Georgia, from Detroit, from those living in border towns and tribal lands are the definitions of people who are creative and resilient and people who know how to get things done. Why? Because our lives depend on it. You see, technology and telecommunications policy intersect with one's ability to dream. And the decisions that we make today, and I hope I don't have to file an ex parte when I say this, the decisions that we make today about having continued funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program, establishing an Office of Civil Rights at the FCC and FTC, including diversity, equity, and inclusion merger guidelines published by the FTC and DOJ, ensuring that civil rights and privacy are centered in artificial intelligence legislation, and also having a meaningful and impactful digital discrimination rule are policies and practices that can empower one's ability to dream. And that, in turn, impacts the economic, political, and social fabric of this country for the better and for the benefit of all. Because I only know I have 5 minutes, so I want to go ahead and wrap up here. And I don't want to be that person by being too long. We can only be the best advocates that we can be if we take the time to rest. So if you don't answer my emails or phone calls within a few hours, trust me when I say that I am so okay with that. Because at the end of the day, this system wants to exhaust us to the point where we aren't able to fight, where we aren't able to think clearly, where we aren't able to present new ideas. And I refuse to let that system of oppression that I'm constantly fighting against have me. So as Tricia Hersey, who calls herself the NAP Bishop, says, rest is resistance. Thank you so much.
To those watching at home, standing O, you can see why we needed to honor Lisa, just an incredible advocate, an incredible person I'm honored to just walk next to and receive ideas from, so thank you. So now I'm here because I'm so delighted. I'm Cheryl Lianza. I'm the policy advisor for the United Church of Christ Media Justice Ministry. To those of you who haven't met me yet. And I am here to honor the amazing Senator Tammy Duckworth with this year's Everett Parker Award. So many people admire the senator for everything from her military service to her not only to be the first senator to give birth during office, but also to be the one to fight to make sure that the next senator who gives birth during office will be able to bring their newborn down to the Senate floor. In just preparing for today, I was watching a video of a senator talking about trade in Chicago, and she was so articulate and like, well, this is how green energy in Illinois is going to interact, and this is the company we need to bring in, and this is and it was just like, I thought, oh my gosh, the people of Illinois are so fortunate, and I actually bring greetings to you because the UCC conference from Illinois says hello, thank you, and congratulations, and glad that their hometown hero is here being honored today. And today, although people honor Senator Duckworth with so many of the other things she's done, we're here to honor work in communications policy. And we need more people who are in the Commerce Committee in the Senate who think about justice. So I am always happy when we have our justice advocates on the Commerce Committee. Starting in 2016, when Ms. Duckworth was still in the House of Representatives, she first introduced a bill called the Video Visitation in Prisons Act. But following year, when she got into the Senate, she introduced a bill that would eventually become the Martha Wright Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act. Senator Duckworth and her staff worked across the aisle. They were relentless. They pursued compromise. They pursued allies across the aisle. The National Sheriff's Association even sat down and talked with them because she made it her business to get to that meeting and talk to those folks. People who I would have said, no compromise is possible. They never, ever, ever gave up. I'm so excited to see, I know, Ben Roadside and Mark Copeland, who were some of our partners in that time. So at the end of the last year, though, despite all that work, I was actually afraid we just missed the boat. Like, the bill was not passed, Congress was adjourning, I wrote this nice email to everybody who worked on it, I was like, thank you guys, like, sometimes when you do everything right, still just, you don't quite get across the finish line. But because the senator and her staff did not get up, they said, well, let's just try one more thing. And all of a sudden, they get a phone call, we're unanimously through the Senate. Like, what? And then all of a sudden, the House folks, swoop in, and once again, we had Congressman Pallone, and he brings Congressman Latta, and once again, bipartisan folks on the floor of the House, and beautiful, beautiful remarks about Martha Wright Reed and her grandson on the floor of the House, and we get ahead, and we pass this bill. So incredibly amazing. Incredible tribute to just the ability to never give up, to keep working hard. And so that law gave the FCC the authority to establish maximum rates that communications providers can charge when they serve prisons, jails, immigration detention, any facility of similar kind. And for the first time, that authority will include in-state rates and video communications. So we are so glad to have leaders like Senator Duckworth to ensure that family members can keep their relationships strong during difficult parts of their lives. It will be easier for people to rejoin their families and communities when they get out, and it is a tremendous gift. And we are thrilled to honor Senator Duckworth with the 2023 Everett Parker Award.
Well, good morning, and it's such a pleasure to be here today. Really, this was very much a team effort. First off, I want to thank all of you for this amazing recognition. It means the world to me. And we're all here today because we believe in a very simple truth, that our fight for inclusivity has to, be inclusive of every sector of our modern world, from voting reform to educational reforms, from environmental justice to, crucially, telecommunications justice. Dr. Everett Parker's life was a testament to that truth. He recognized that unless we as a society address the prejudices that was running rampant in our media, the civil rights that he and so many others were fighting for would remain forever out of reach from different segments of our population. He believed in every person's right to be heard, including the right to be heard by the FCC. He argued that the public, not just deep-pocketed companies, had the right to mold and form and shape America's broadcasting so that it, like our nation, would be truly for the people and by the people as well. And along the way, he changed how so many people view telecommunications, instilling a moral imperative into the FCC's work. And those are just a few of the reasons why receiving this award means so much to me. Because every day as a United States Senator, I've tried to live by a similar mission to ensure that the people's representatives actually represents all of the people. And that includes working to guarantee that every American has access to the telecommunications they need to keep them heard no matter where they may be located. This is the moral crux of the heart of a bill that I was proud to write, and by me saying I wrote it, actually it was Mark Copeland who wrote it, push forward and watch President Biden sign into law earlier this year, the Martha Wright Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act, named after the incredible Martha Wright Reed, who established a legacy that will live on in every preserved connection between a child and an incarcerated parent, between spouses and partners, and especially between the dedicated grandparents and the grandchild they deeply love and refuse to give up on. You can see Martha Wright Reed's example and how it represents America at its best. She was a citizen refusing to be silent in the face of injustice and ultimately using her voice and her actions to galvanize the forces of change to right a long-standing wrong. You can also see Dr. Parker's legacy in every word, every line of this new law, which takes the ethical imperative of Dr. Parker's work and applies it to our incarceration system. It empowers the FCC to finally end a predatory phone call rate scheme that all too often prevents incarcerated persons from staying in touch with their families. For years, one phone call from a correctional facility would cost about as much as a monthly phone plan. It prevented too many children from being able to hear the comfort of their parents' voice. It kept too many spouses from being able to say a simple, "I am here for you," to their partners, even from 100 miles away. And let's just be clear, when unjust and unreasonable communications rates cut off an incarcerated person from vital connections, the harm extends far beyond that single family. After all, a vast majority of incarcerated persons will eventually be released, and we all have a stake in making sure that our nation better prepares them to navigate the daunting challenge of re-entry. That is why it was so important to enshrine in federal law a clear and enforceable requirement that all prison communication rates, whether interstate or intrastate, must be just and reasonable. Of course, restoring the FCC's authority to ensure prison communications rates are just and reasonable was only the first step. And I know under Chair Rosenworcel's leadership, the FCC is working around the clock to effectively implement our new law. To me, it's clear that defending telecom justice is interwoven with the fight to protect so many of the other rights we hold dear. After all, being able to communicate when incarcerated allows you better access to the healthcare information that you need, to the legal representation that you are entitled to. It allows each of us, even outside of a prison's walls, to be able to reach the necessary vital information on TV, on the internet, wherever, about our politics, about our world, about our next fight for equality and justice for all. Because it comes down to this: it is much harder to live your life fully if you cannot use your voice freely. That is one of the many lessons Dr. Parker taught us, and it is the principle that I will keep striving to live by every moment that I'm fortunate enough to call myself a United States Senator. I want to close with how I began, by simply saying thank you. Thank you to Mark Copeland, who authored this final version of this bill and worked so hard negotiating back and forth, keeping a straight face in those meetings and coming back and throwing things against the wall in his office and then going right back again. I thank Mark Copeland for saying to me, "Tammy, you got to go sit down with the Sheriff's Association. Go into the lion's den." But we established a relationship, a moment of trust, and we got to a place where they actually endorsed this bill. And that was key in getting Republicans to co-sponsor it and to get this across the finish line. I also want to make sure to thank Cheryl, who was more than just someone who advised us on doing this. She was key in providing, as a vital expert, a resource during lengthy and complex negotiations over the potential impact of modifications to the legislative language when it came up, as well as her keen understanding of the recent judicial rulings in the field was vital to us crafting the final bill that passed. So thank you for this honor. Thank you, Ben Roadside is here, my legislative director, who kept things on focus and who at the very last moment said, you know, I think we can pull this off. Let's do this one more time. And use your House connections when you were in the House to get this across the finish line. At that, you know, we pulled victory from the jaws of defeat, literally in the last moments of the legislative year. So thank you for this honor, but much more importantly, thank you each of you for working so tirelessly to ensure that everyone's voice can be heard, no matter their zip code, no matter their incarceration status, no matter what. Thank you.
Good morning. I am the Reverend Freeman Palmer, and I serve as the conference minister of the Central Atlantic Conference of the United Church of Christ. And I am a proud member of the UCC Media Justice Board of Directors. I worked as a financial executive at CBS earlier in my career, and I'm particularly happy to bring that background to the justice work that we do together. This morning, I am honored to introduce this year's Parker Lecturer, FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel. We are particularly delighted to welcome Ms. Rosenworcel because this week, she will become the longest-serving FCC commissioner of anyone appointed since 1975. She will surpass the 127 months in office of her mentor and former boss, Commissioner Michael Kopps. Since becoming a commissioner in 2012, Chair Rosenworcel has made her mark by promoting the important role of communications in education, in public safety, and in economic prosperity. She prioritizes accessibility, affordability, and robust competition to benefit consumers. She now leads the agency as it tackles several issues that are close to our hearts: providing affordable telecommunications for incarcerated people, providing affordable broadband services to low-income people, adopting net neutrality rules, and writing rules to prohibit digital discrimination. Anyone who has met with Chair Rosenworcel knows she is always the person with the most direct policy experience than just about anyone in the room. Her staff is amazing, and yet you always know who is calling the shots. Chair Rosenworcel plans meticulously, keeps her eyes on her priorities, and her antenna tuned toward the art of the possible. We can count on Chair Rosenworcel to explain the connection between communications policy and preventing domestic violence in the online women's magazine Bustle, or stand outside preaching to the protesters assembled to save net neutrality. She never forgets that public safety is one of her top obligations, and that communications is critical for people so that they can live their own lives and make their own choices and priorities. When you meet with her, she wants practical answers to her questions and advocates not to come into a meeting unprepared if you want her to persuade her to vote on your way. She has kept the FCC moving and doing good work for almost 3 years without a working majority. And not least of all, she is the first woman to be chair of the FCC. So we are so very happy to celebrate this milestone with you, Chair Rosenworcel. And I am so delighted to introduce her to all of us as the 41st Everett Parker Lecturer. And there's a plaque too.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much for those words and for welcoming me. And thank you to everyone at UCC Media Justice for giving me the honor of delivering the Parker Lecture. So as you heard, I'm the first woman to permanently lead the Federal Communications Commission. It took too long. I'm also the first mom in this role, and that means something here today, because when you say lecture, my thoughts immediately race to trying to teach my children a lesson, trying to explain a wrong, and talk about how to make it right. This morning, I want to talk about correcting some efforts from the past, so I'm hoping that it will all translate. Actually, when I sat down to think about these remarks, I first did a search to see what the difference is between a lecture and a speech. The first thing that popped up said that lectures are meant to be educational, while speeches are meant to be persuasive. But I immediately thought, when are these two things mutually exclusive? Look, I guarantee you Reverend Palmer and Reverend Handler Voss, their congregants, leave here on Sunday feeling both inspired and informed. So I, like them, I'm going to aim to do both. Now, the Parker Lecture matters because Everett Parker matters. As you heard, he stood for justice and stood up to the FCC when it approved the license of a Jackson, Mississippi television station that was suppressing Black voices. He petitioned the agency to change course, and he had something that I think is common to all change makers, and that's tenacity. Because he took that case all the way to the Supreme Court, and he prevailed in a milestone decision that opened the door for an African American to lead WLBT and for more minority voices to be broadcast over the airwaves. In one of his last interviews, and by the way, this was at age 99, he said, "I want them to remember that I was a guy who fought like the devil for the rights of minorities." He can rest assured we remember, because none of us are going to forget Everett Parker. So thank you to everyone at UCC Media Justice for carrying on his legacy. Thank you also for having the extraordinarily good judgment to honor Dr. Elisa Valentin and Senator Tammy Duckworth, and let's give them both one more round of applause. Your timing is also pretty spectacular because later this week I'm joining Senator Duckworth in Chicago to hear about the high cost of prison phone rates. So I just want to add a few more words to what she said about the issue. So many families of the incarcerated pay outrageous rates just to stay in touch with loved ones. In fact, for a single call, they can pay as much as you or I pay for a monthly unlimited plan. And that harms families and children of the incarcerated, but actually it harms all of us. Because regular contact with kin, it reduces recidivism. And for years, the FCC has been working on this problem, but the tools we had were limited and did not allow us to address calls within a state or video calls. And thanks to Senator Duckworth's leadership and tenacity, the FCC was finally given the goods to close this glaring loophole. And thanks to the law she championed, the Martha Wright Reed Just and Reasonable Communications Act, we now have the authority to address these calls, and we are hard at work doing so. And on this issue, I also want to call out my friend and former colleague at the FCC, and that is Mignon Clyburn. Yeah. She has been relentless, and on the policymaking side, nobody has done more to seek justice for families who have been harmed by the high cost of prison payphone bills. And when I was preparing for this event, I was thinking, not only do I have to try to measure up to Senator Duckworth and Dr. Valentin this morning, I also need to meet the high standard of previous Parker lecturers. There's been a lot of them, and that includes Mignon Clyburn. In fact, there are too many luminaries to mention on the list of former lecturers, and that includes my former boss and mentor, Michael Copps. And last year's lecturer, my good friend, Maya Wiley. So looking at the past speeches, I also noticed that the first FCC chair to deliver this address was actually Reed Hunt, and that was back in 1994. That was a long time ago. It was the very beginning of the internet era, and back then, maybe you called the internet the information superhighway. I know I did. So I decided to take a look at the remarks of my predecessor, and when I did, something really quickly caught my eye. He thanked UCC Media Justice, which was then known as the Office of Communication of the United Church of Christ. And he said, "We can't afford to deny anyone the opportunity to enjoy the communications revolution. And in this regard, your organization has been particularly important." But then he went on to say that you have provided the commission with valuable input on critical issues ranging from cable television to equal employment opportunities and, wait for it, electronic redlining. So let's pause for a moment on that, electronic redlining, because if you know about a certain statutory deadline the FCC has on November 15th, you know why that grabbed my attention. Now, I'm going to have more to say on that deadline in a second, but first let me unpack what Chairman Hunt was actually referencing. In the early 1990s, there was a new technology called video dial tone. For those who do not remember, which I'm guessing is pretty much all of us, myself included, don't worry, I did the research. Video dial tone allowed the transmission of video over phone lines. It was a possible new competitor to cable. And UCC Media Justice and a number of other public interest advocates, they took notice. They expressed concern that the early deployment of video dial tone was bypassing minority and low-income communities in lots of markets. So in 1994, the same year that Chairman Hunt gave this Parker lecture, he had the FCC open a proceeding to seek feedback on these allegations. Now, UCC Media Justice, along with the Center for Media Education, the Consumer Federation of America, the NAACP, and the National Council of La Raza submitted comments. Looking back now, many of the predictions and principles in their joint statement, well, they stood the test of time better than video dial tone technology did. But this is a good thing, because two of the people who helped develop that statement of principle are here in the room. So let me have a quick round of applause for two legacy champions of media justice, and that's Angela Campbell and Andy Schwartzman. Now, they called it electronic redlining because UCC Media Justice and their allies saw patterns in the deployment of advanced communications that resembled old school redlining. You raised a red flag, and at a time when just about 6% of people in this country had access to the internet, you made two predictions. First, you said interactive broadband communications, this advanced stuff, it's going to change everything. Second, you said if we did not get this right, we would end up with digital haves and have-nots. So let me put that another way. You predicted the digital divide before the digital revolution was even underway. And that's stunning. Your words from back then remind us that when new technologies come along, we have got to pay attention to how they are deployed and who gets access. We should be mindful that there are communities out there who way too often are underserved and overlooked. I like to think that nearly 30 years from now, there's a good chance people will say something similar about my own remarks. But that's not entirely because of my words today. It's because of what Congress and the FCC have been doing. In fact, if 1994 was when the digital divide first became apparent, there's good reason to believe we will look back on this moment as the time when decades of talking about it have passed and we committed to close it like never before. Now, that unprecedented effort has been powered by the bipartisan infrastructure law. It is the biggest public investment in our economic capacity since the interstate highway system. And nothing in history comes close to the commitment it makes to address equitable access to the essential infrastructure of the digital age. So let's talk about that commitment. Now, from a budgetary perspective, which is the way most people start, the most significant part of the law is the $42.5 billion it provides to build broadband all across this country where infrastructure is lacking. That's huge, and my colleagues at the Department of Commerce are working with the states to support deployment with these funds. Again, it's extraordinary. But the case I want to make for you today is that you could strip that $42.5 billion out, and this would still be landmark legislation for digital equity. And it just so happens that the other provisions that make this law so significant, well, they've been entrusted to the FCC. That does not mean what I am about to say is biased. It just means what I am about to say is really well informed. So thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, we are attacking the digital divide from a new angle. Instead of focusing just on broadband deployment, we are paying attention to broadband affordability. For the first time in Washington, we have acknowledged that closing the digital divide requires addressing affordability. And if we needed an object lesson in why this is true, just remember the pandemic. It wasn't that long ago. We all saw kids outside of fast food restaurants trying to go to online class, and adults sitting in parked cars to catch a free wireless signal just to keep up with life during an especially trying time. We learned that too many people in this country struggle to keep connected because they have difficulty paying for internet access. And that's why the FCC has been able to build the largest broadband affordability initiative in our nation's history. It's called the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP for short. And to the uninitiated, here's how it works. Eligible households get discounts of up to $30 a month on broadband service, and that number goes up to $75 a month on tribal lands. Households can also receive up to $100 to offset the cost of a computer or tablet. And you can learn some more and find out how to sign up at getinternet.gov. Most major internet providers also have a link on their websites to make it easy to enroll, and many have high-speed, low-cost service packages that are right at $30 at no cost to ACP subscribers. We now have 21 million households enrolled nationwide. That means 21 million homes with the connections they need for work, school, and so much more. I think that adds up to 21 million reasons we have come too far with this program to turn back now. We need to make sure that support for ACP continues, because while the funding that Congress provided to us for the ACP and the bipartisan infrastructure law was powerful, it was not permanent. If ACP support is allowed to expire early next year, millions are going to get shut off from the internet service they have come to rely on. So we need Congress to continue the good this program has done and build on it. And to do that, we're going to need people in the grassroots level, and I think you know something about that, to speak up and tell Washington their stories. We're going to need people to talk about what a difference ACP is making in their communities. Again, we have come so far, we cannot stop now. All right, let's review. The bipartisan infrastructure law created the largest broadband affordability program in our nation's history, and that's the ACP run by the FCC. The bipartisan infrastructure law also created the largest broadband deployment effort ever, with the $42.5 billion distributed by the Department of Commerce for high-speed infrastructure. Now, let me tell you another way this law is making history, because it also involves the FCC. And to get this discussion started, I want to first focus on the findings in the law. In fact, I'm going to read them to you word for word. Get ready. All right, Congress finds the following. Number one, access to affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband is essential to full participation in modern life in the United States. Number two, the persistent digital divide is a barrier to the economic competitiveness of the United States, and it is essential for public services, including healthcare and education. Number three, the digital divide disproportionately affects communities of color, low-income areas, and rural areas, and the benefits of broadband should be broadly enjoyed by all. Number four, in many communities across the country, increased competition among broadband providers has the potential to offer consumers more affordable, high-quality options for service. And number five, the pandemic has underscored the critical importance of affordable, high-speed broadband for individuals, families, and communities to be able to work, learn, and connect remotely. So if those findings feel familiar to the people who are here today, I just want you to remember how remarkable and important this language is, because it represents the consensus of a bipartisan majority of Congress. In other words, folks from across the ideological spectrum put into law that broadband is essential, that the digital divide disproportionately affects people of color, low-income communities, and rural areas, and that this divide is hurting the economic competitiveness of the United States. It feels appropriate to say amen. So this is the most definitive statement we have in the law that our work is not done until everyone everywhere has access to high-speed internet. So on top of support for affordability and deployment, Congress gave the FCC a new mandate to address digital discrimination. Now, to describe it again, I want to start with the law. This is what it says. It is the policy of the United States that insofar as technically and economically feasible, subscribers should benefit from equal access to broadband. To ensure this happens, Congress directs the FCC to, quote, adopt rules to facilitate equal access to broadband internet access service. And you would ask, what should these rules involve? And Congress told us. Preventing digital discrimination of access based on income level, race, ethnicity, color, religion, or national origin, and identifying necessary steps for the Commission to take to eliminate discrimination. Okay, that's a lot of text. But this statutory language is powerful. And there's one other instruction from Congress that accompanies these words. We were told to adopt these rules within 2 years. So that makes the deadline for adoption November 15th, which is 3 weeks from tomorrow. So now I want to tell you about what we have been doing at the FCC to prepare for this day. we created the task force to prevent digital discrimination. And the task force conducted listening sessions, in fact, 8 of them, in places far and wide, like Baltimore, Maryland, Los Angeles, California, Topeka, Kansas, and a whole bunch of other places. At each, we were able to hear from the community, listen to people fighting digital discrimination on the ground, and learn about their experiences with industry. This is important because the only way to create rules that prevent and eliminate digital discrimination is by hearing with everyone who has a role to play, including state, local, and tribal governments, community leaders and advocates, and providers too. So these gatherings drove home something really critical. They made clear that the first question we needed to answer in crafting our rules, well, it's how do you define digital discrimination? In other words, what is it we're trying to prevent and eliminate to facilitate equal access to broadband service? At the listening sessions around the country and in the written record before the FCC, there was just about universal agreement that digital discrimination includes business practices motivated by discriminatory intent. But there was less agreement regarding whether the definition should also include business practices that have discriminatory effects. Some commenters who weighed in argued that the definition should be limited to intentional acts of discrimination and disparate treatment. Other commentators countered that to be meaningful, the definition has to include claims of disparate impact. So we took it all in. We read the record from front to back. We reviewed the listening sessions. We studied the statute, and specifically the fact that the explicit goal of these rules is to facilitate equal access to broadband. Let me repeat that. Facilitate equal access to broadband. And we realized that the definition of digital discrimination has to include disparate impact. Here's why. There is little or no evidence in the legislative history or the record of this proceeding that intentional discrimination by broadband providers is a meaningful contributor to disparities in internet access. That's worth emphasizing. When a lot of people hear the word discrimination, they get their backs up and they think they're being tarred for bigotry. That's not actually what this is about. What this is about, and what the record shows, is that there are gaps in access for low-income, rural, tribal, and minority communities. It shows that the digital divide significantly tracks the housing redlining that came into existence under the National Housing Act of 1934. It shows that many of the communities that lack adequate access to broadband today, well, they're the same ones that suffer from longstanding patterns of residential segregation and economic disadvantage. It shows that minority status and income correlate with broadband access, and that, what do you know, UCC Media Justice was onto something when it identified the problem with electronic redlining nearly 3 decades ago. And it shows that these gaps in broadband access stem from policies and practices that might be neutral on their face, instead of the result of intentionally discriminatory conduct. All right, now step back for a minute and remember, Congress tasked the FCC with developing rules to facilitate equal access to broadband. And as part of this goal, we were told to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination of access. So if we were to adopt rules that only cover discriminatory intent, we would fall short of fully meeting our legal obligation to facilitate equal access to broadband. So if the agency is going to adopt rules that fulfill our statutory mandate, our definition of digital discrimination needs to include both disparate treatment and disparate impact. Plus, the decision to cover disparate impact is consistent with over half a century of civil rights law that embraces disparate impact analysis. Remember, it was back in 1971 that the Supreme Court blessed the use of disparate impact analysis to determine whether unlawful discrimination had taken place in the employment context. And in the ensuing years, it has reaffirmed this decision in other civil rights contexts, including as recently as 2015 in a decision known as inclusive communities. Moreover, other federal agencies, and we studied them, have consistently interpreted anti-discrimination statutes that they administer, like Title VI, Title VII, and Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, to reach discriminatory effects as well as discriminatory intent. So I think you can see that we've had a busy 2 years studying and working on these matters. So today, I'm sharing with my FCC colleagues draft rules to prohibit digital discrimination. They address intentionally discriminatory conduct as well as conduct that produces discriminatory effects. And the draft rules also create a new dedicated pathway for digital discrimination complaints. With the guidance of so many in the civil rights community, including Dr. Valentin, who we've honored here today, along with Mark Morial and the National Urban League, we have a really thoughtful approach to the complaint process. We're going to create a process aimed at finding solutions that work for all parties, but when that's not feasible, our Enforcement Bureau is going to step in with the entire enforcement arsenal at its disposal to seek remedies. These rules are strong. I mean, when you consider that Congress explicitly directed us to prevent and eliminate digital discrimination of access, well, they'd better be. But I'm going to also argue that they are fair and reasonable. Let me explain why. As the law requires, we accept genuine reasons of technical and economic feasibility as valid reasons why a broadband provider may not offer equal access on their networks. We're going to review those defenses on a case-by-case basis. Our draft rules also say that differential impact alone is not enough to establish liability. They're going to have to offer causality, where they demonstrate there's a relationship between the identified differential impacts and the respondents' policies and practices. But that's not all. The draft rules also help offer guidance to solve these problems before they even get to the FCC, and that's important. That's because the law directed us to develop model policies and practices for preventing digital discrimination that can be adopted by states and localities. So we had our Communications Equity and Diversity Council take the lead developing these practices, and they are included in the draft rules. Finally, we recognize that the ultimate goal of this proceeding is to facilitate equal access to broadband, just like the law says. So we're floating a new proposal. We're seeking comment on new reporting requirements that would give a clearer picture of recently completed deployment, upgrade, and maintenance projects. The hope is that this process could help remove impediments to equal broadband access before they even develop. All right. That is a lot of detail and explaining. I think this turned into a lecture after all. So now I'm going to take it up a level. The reason we have been able to do so much so fast to address equitable access to the digital age is because a lot of people have put in the work. People in Congress, people in this room, people in the public interest community, people at companies that have engaged with us and worked through the hard questions. Now, looming in the background of all this effort is another figure, and that is Everett Parker. Because he did more than just tear down barriers of discrimination in the broadcasting industry, he changed the way our policies were made. For a long time, the only people who could participate in the FCC's proceedings were those we regulated. They had a clear economic stake in what we were considering, and that was treated like end of the story. But he actually rewrote it. Because a court embraced his argument that as citizens, we all have a right to be heard before federal agencies like the FCC. And that might seem obvious now, but it was revolutionary back then. And I think it changed the FCC for the better. So that is an extraordinary legacy. I ultimately, though, believe we honor it best, not with words, but with deeds. And we have work to do to close the digital divide. So let's be tenacious together and get it done. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, for making news, for all your incredible work leading the agency, and thank you so much to all the incredible FCC staff that I know are here and put many, many hours in many rooms, and all the advocates that work to both pass the law and to help the FCC implement it. We're so honored that you shared this information today with us. And now, we are basically at the close of our event. We have two more things, a prayer and a song to send us on our way. So right after the prayer, you're going to hear again from the fantastic DC Labor Chorus. We're so glad to stand in solidarity with workers everywhere who are really bringing up their rights and getting those victories established. But now, before that, I'm going to call on Rabbi Charles Feinberg, who is the Executive Director Emeritus of the Interfaith Action for Human Rights, to offer our benediction. At this critical time in the world, we are mourning the horrific loss of innocent lives in the Mideast. We stand in solidarity against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and all forms of religious bigotry. Thank you very much, Rabbi Feinberg.
Thank you so much for this honor to be able to give the blessing. I'd just like to say that Interfaith Action for Human Rights was founded a little over 8 years ago, and our focus was on conditions of confinement in area prisons. And so I salute the FCC and its chairperson, Chairman Rosenworcel, and the commissioners and all the work that all the advocates have done regarding the telephone call issue, because I have personal experience with that, and all the complaints that we received from family members and from people incarcerated about how they were being ripped off regarding their phone calls. So I think that's just terrific, and I salute you for all that work. I have one word of caution, though. And in my experience working in advocacy, especially with the incarceration system in our country, that legislation doesn't always mean that it's followed. And so I urge you to keep engaged on this. The prison system in our country is a vast archipelago of all kinds of places. They're run by people who really often aren't very impressed by the legislation that's passed in the legislatures and in Congress. So it's really important to keep engaged and to keep pushing to make sure that the legislation and the regulations that have been formulated are observed and enforced. And the second thing I will just say is I'm so happy that you are engaged with what goes on inside our prisons. And I hope the advocates here don't turn your gaze away from what goes on inside our prisons. The telephone issue is just the tip of the iceberg, and people are abused day in and day out in our prison systems, and that needs to end. The Hebrew Bible in the book of Exodus teaches us this warning: stay far away from falsehood, from lies. Do not kill the innocent and the righteous, because I will not acquit the guilty. Too often we witness how some people attack others online. They attempt to destroy the reputation of the innocent by lying and spewing falsehoods. During wartime, and which unfortunately we see too often in this world, the danger of destroying others through deceitful words and by rushing to judgment is most acute. In recent days, we have seen and heard how many people have rushed to judgments based on half-truths and lies. And too often our public communication and discourse has become full of angry and harsh rhetoric threatening the well-being of others. and we all become afraid of retaliation if we do speak. The most important answer to our many painful challenges is to become more compassionate with each other, more compassionate to our foes, more compassionate to our friends and allies, and more compassionate to ourselves. And so here is my prayer. Oh God, give us the wisdom, the strength, and the courage to stay far away from the lies, the falsehoods, and the hasty judgments. God, help us use our words to show compassion, to search for truth, thereby creating the possibility of peace. Oh God, we long for the day when war and bloodshed cease, when nation will not threaten another nation, and the human family will no longer know war. May God help us see the day when all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and above all, to love. Compassionate God, restore our power of compassion so that we can live without fear and in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Rebecca Weiss, Larry Bastian, Elise Bryant, we are members of the DC Labor Chorus, and it is our honor and pleasure to be with you all today. We invite you to our December 2nd, 25th anniversary concert at the Washington Ethical Society. And we say to each and every one of you,
well, there's
honey in the rock for all God's children, honey in the rock. Honey in the rock, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed everyone today. Sing with us. Well, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock. Hey! Honey in the rock, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed everyone today. In every way that I can, feed everyone today. Open my heart and lend a hand, feed everyone today. Well, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock, honey in the rock, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed everyone today. Pray for peace the whole world wide. Feed everyone today. Pray for the end of hurtful pride. Feed everyone today. Well, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock. Hey! Honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed everyone today. One of these nights round 12 o'clock. Feed everyone today. This old world's no reel and rock. Feed everyone today. Well, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock, oh! Honey in the rock, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed everyone today. Freedom! Freedom is the song we sing. Feed everyone today. We shall make the mountains ring. Feed everyone today. Well, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. Honey in the rock. Hey! Honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed everyone today. Freedom is the song we sing. Freedom is the song we sing. Feed everyone. Feed everyone today. We shall make the mountains ring. We shall make the mountains ring. Yeah. Feed everyone today. Say it loud. Well, there's honey in the rock for all God's children. honey in the rock. Oh, honey in the rock. There's honey in the rock for all God's children. Feed everyone today. Thank you. Thank you.
UCC Media Justice Board, please report to the altar for a picture.